Joe Abercrombie is one of my favourite fantasy writers of recent years. His first Law series is a dark and twisted take on fantasy tropes, covering a whole continent over the span of many decades as it progresses from barbaric feudalism to the beginnings of an industrial revolution. It's commonly classed as grimdark, and there are certainly plenty of disturbing plot developments and not too many happy endings, but there is a lot of humour in there, and the characters are well drawn and highly memorable. So far it's made up of basically 3 trilogies and a short story collection, but you can't really jump into the later books, and everything builds on each other, and minor characters in one volume become major characters later on. So it's best to start at the beginning with the blade itself and go forward from there. But I'm not here to talk about that. This video is about his new book, The Devils, which is the start of a whole new series. Instead of a fantasy world, this is set in medieval Europe. But you can tell from the map at the start, it's not exactly the same as our world. Some of the countries have different names, Troy and Atlantis exist, and there's something called the devastation of Carthage in place of North Africa. It's not clear exactly when this history diverged from our own, but it has to be thousands of years ago. The Catholic Church exists, but the Pope and Cardinals are all women, and they don't worship Jesus, but the Saviour, who is said to be God's daughter, who died on a wheel instead of a cross. In fact, there are 2 different factions, one based in the Holy City, which may or may not be Rome, and the other in Troy. And elves also exist, threatening an invasion that would be apocalyptic in scale. All of this has to be pieced together as the reader goes along. Abercrombie is not one for masses of exposition, preferring to start in the thick of the action and fill the reader in on the details later, if at all. So the book starts with a fast-paced chase scene. A street thief Alex runs through the crowded streets of the Holy City, pursued by her murderous creditors. It's a thrilling way to start the book, immersing you in the action right from the start. And it ends with the first big surprise, as we learn that Alex is actually the rightful heir to the throne of Troy. But in order to get her there in one piece, the Cardinals provide her with an escort, made up of powerful supernatural beings, all magically bound to protect her. Kind of like a medieval version of Suicide Squad. I'll talk about all the characters individually later, but the basic structure of the book is a road trip, as they make the long journey from the Holy City to Troy. So in each part we get a few chapters of all the characters bantering and bickering with each other, before they are set upon by a small army led by one of Alex's cousins, who are all out to kill her and take the throne for themselves. These set pieces often go on for multiple chapters. Abercrombie is really good at fight scenes and knows how to make the most of them, constantly putting the group in an impossible situation against overwhelming odds and somehow having them come out on top. You can see why the book has already been optioned by James Cameron. All these fight scenes would work very well on screen, and they're all in atmospheric locations, such as a burning ship, a possibly large tower, or ruined monastery on the edge of a cliff. If anything, the structure maybe gets a little too predictable. It might have worked better if there'd been a few more characters, so that more of them could have been killed off along the way, and there would have been much more jeopardy. The central group basically comes through everything unscathed, so if anything they feel a little overpowered. Towards the end of the book the threats all seem to be over, but you just know that there's another twist on the way, and it's only a matter of time before it all goes to hell again, although the means by which it does happen do come as a surprise. It still ends on a rather downbeat note, reminding the reader that all the characters you've followed through their many adventures are still prisoners, with no hope of release, and their futures still remain bleak, which is very much in keeping with Abercrombie's other works. That said, it is still a very funny book for the most part. All the characters are well drawn, and the interactions between them are a delight, with their initial antagonism giving way to surprising friendships and unexpected couplings. By the end they do all feel like a family, albeit a very dysfunctional one. As to the characters themselves, you can broadly divide them into prisoners and guards, so I'll talk about the prisoners first. Balthazar the Necromancer is one of my favourites. He's vain, arrogant, and convinced of his own brilliance, forever trying to escape the Pope's binding and being utterly humiliated every time. For the movie I would cast Coleman Domingo, who is very good as the scheming Victor Strand in Fear the Walking Dead, and this is a very similar kind of character. Vigor is another highlight. She's a werewolf, so she frequently transforms into a bloodthirsty monster who rips apart anything in her path. In her human form she is big, muscle-bound, covered in tattoos, and has a very frank and forthright attitude to sex and nudity, which contrasts with the rather puritanic attitudes of some of the other characters. So a good deal of humour comes out of that, but she also has to live with the guilt that her wolf self has murdered so many people. I'm not sure who they would cast to match the physical description of the character. Gwendolyn Christie has the height, Katie O'Brien has the muscles, but realistically they'll probably end up casting somebody we've never heard of. Sunny is an elf. We are continually told that all elves are bloodthirsty murderers, but this may not be accurate, as she is very sweet and sympathetic. She can turn invisible, so she's like the thief of the group, always fading into the background, but feeling isolated from the others. I would cast Anya Taylor-Joy in this role, as she basically looks like an elf already. Also on the team is Baron Rickard, a vampire. His appearance goes from very old to youthful, as he consumes more blood. And he has hypnotic powers, but if he uses them it drains his youth and turns him elderly again. None of this is spelled out directly, but it's fun to piece together how it all works. He doesn't have the most character development, so I'm not sure who they would cast. Maybe someone like Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt as a nod to Interview with the Vampire. In the category of guards, the leader is technically Brother Diaz, a studious monk who is put in charge at the start, despite having no inclination or ability for such a role. He just wants a quiet life of peace and contemplation, and ends up having to risk his life over and over again. So he's very timid and unassuming at first, but he comes into his own as the story goes along. Again, not entirely sure who I would cast. I think it probably requires someone short and slight, like a young John Leguizamo. Jacob of Thorn is the muscle of the group, an immortal warrior. He's cursed to never die, but he feels every injury he gets, and after hundreds of years he's sick of it. I would cast someone who's old, but not too old to do the fight scenes, someone like Graham McTavish from Outlander. Then there's Baptiste, who's a bit of a one-note character. Every time they need someone with a particular skill, she mentions that she happened to do that for a few months back in the day. It's fun the first time, but it gets a bit old, and she doesn't really get much development beyond that. But I would cast Natalia Tenner, as she matches the character description, and she deserves to get more roles. Finally, there is Alex, the street thief turned empress. She's arguably the main character of the book, and she's the one who gets the most development, with a doomed romance and all sorts of revelations about her past. I would cast Daphne Keane. She's young enough to look the part, but she has experience doing all the action scenes that the part requires. There is a sequel on the way with the surviving characters, so I look forward to that. But the book works just fine as a standalone volume. It's a bit predictable, some of the characters are underdeveloped, but it's a fun, fast-paced, entertaining read, and I can definitely recommend it. If you're thinking about buying it, then please consider using my Amazon affiliate link, which I'll put below. That will help support this channel. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.